How did an orphan with no money create the most famous watch brand in the world? A lot of Rolex's history is shrouded in mystery and secrecy, but today we're peeling back the layers to uncover the incredible rags-to-riches story of Rolex and answering a burning question: why are Rolexes really so expensive? Our story begins with Hans Wilsdorf, Rolex's brilliant and enigmatic founder. Born in Germany in 1881, Hans had a happy childhood until tragedy struck. At just 12 years old, both his parents passed away within months of each other, leaving him an orphan. Forced to live with his uncles, he was sent off to boarding school. Heartbroken, young Hans could have given up, but instead he threw himself into his studies, finding solace in learning languages, a skill that would later open international doors for him. After graduating, Hans moved to Switzerland and took a job at Kuno Korten, a company that exported pocket watches. He started as a clerk, but this wasn't just a boring desk job. He was getting an inside look at how watches were made. Every day, winding hundreds of watches, he became obsessed with precision, craftsmanship, and the dream of creating the perfect watch. Then, in 1903, he left Switzerland for London, working for a company where he wasn't just pushing papers, he was learning the art of sales and marketing. He quickly realized something crucial. It wasn't just about making great watches, it was about making people want them. By 1905, at just 24 years old, Hans was ready to build his own empire. Using his savings, plus funding from his brother-in-law Alfred Davis, he co-founded Wilsdorf and Davis, importing Swiss watches to sell in the UK. But there was a problem. Back then, wristwatches weren't popular. They were seen as delicate, unreliable, and frankly, more of a fashion accessory for women than a serious timepiece. His friends told him he was making a huge mistake, but Hans, he saw the future. He believed wristwatches would completely replace pocket watches, not just as a style choice, but because they were more convenient, elegant, and practical. So, ignoring all the doubters, he took a massive risk, investing every penny into producing some of the highest quality wristwatches ever made. At first, even his business partner was skeptical, but Hans had a secret weapon, an obsession with quality and an eye for marketing genius. He met with the finest Swiss watchmakers, learning their secrets. Then, he used old connections to import high-precision Swiss movements, ensuring his watches weren't just stylish, but exceptionally accurate. Of course, even the best product needs a great brand name. And here's where things get weird. Hans claimed that he spent weeks trying to invent a name, testing hundreds of letter combinations, but nothing felt right. Then, one morning, while riding to work, a genie whispered in his ear the name Rolex. Whether or not you believe the genie story, one thing is certain. The name was perfect. Short, stylish, easy to pronounce in any language, and packed with prestige. From that moment on, every watch bore the name Rolex, and the world took notice. By 1910, Rolex became the first wristwatch to receive the Swiss Certificate of Precision. Then, in 1914, the British Kew Observatory gave a Rolex its first Class A rating, something unheard of for a wristwatch. But then, disaster. World War I erupted. Rolex had grown into a thriving business with over 60 employees in its London headquarters. But because Hans was German, tensions skyrocketed. Worse, Britain imposed a 33% import tax on luxury goods. Hans had two options: stay and struggle, or move and thrive. He chose the latter. Rolex relocated to Switzerland, escaping the tax burden and positioning itself in the heart of the world's best watchmaking industry. And while other watch companies collapsed during the war, Rolex thrived, becoming the preferred choice for soldiers and officers. But Hans didn't just rely on quality. He mastered the art of marketing. He placed Rolex watches on explorers, athletes, and pioneers. He ran radio and newspaper ads long before other brands understood their power. And in 1926, when Rolex introduced the world's first fully waterproof watch, the Rolex Oyster, Hans had an unforgettable idea. A young woman was about to swim across the English Channel, and Hans convinced her to do it wearing a Rolex Oyster. After over 10 grueling hours in the freezing waters, she emerged, and the Rolex was still ticking perfectly. Newspapers went wild. Hans didn't stop there. He told jewelers to display Rolex Oysters in fish tanks, with real fish swimming around them. Imagine walking past a shop window and seeing a watch underwater, still working. You'd want one too. Then, in 1931, Rolex invented another game changer, the perpetual rotor, the world's first self-winding watch mechanism, and the legend kept growing. time. Rolex became the choice of record breakers and risk takers. The first Everest flight crew wore Rolex watches. Malcolm Campbell set a land speed record in a Rolex, and James Bond, he wore a Rolex too. By 1945, Rolex had released the Datejust, the first automatic watch with a date display. But tragedy struck again. Hans lost his wife, Florence, just before the watch's grand launch. Now, alone and childless, Hans knew he had to secure Rolex's future. So, in 1946, he created the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation and transferred 100% ownership of Rolex to it. To this day, Rolex remains owned by this secretive foundation, meaning there are no shareholders, no financial disclosures, and no taxes on its profits. Instead, Rolex operates in the shadows, making it nearly impossible to know how much money they make or what they do with it. And yet, Rolex only grew stronger. Even during the quartz crisis of the 1970s, when cheap battery-powered watches wiped out most traditional watchmakers, Rolex didn't just survive, it thrived. But why? Why do people pay thousands or even millions for a Rolex when smartphones tell time for free? The answer: Rolex isn't just a watch, it's a status symbol. From Hollywood legends like Paul Newman to world leaders like JFK and Winston Churchill, to sports icons like Roger Federer, who earns $8 million a year from Rolex, the brand is synonymous with success. And Rolex knows exactly what it's doing. They limit supply to drive demand. They never discount. Rolex watches never go on sale. They even buy back old stock to keep prices high. And guess what? It works. Today, Rolex is a Veblen good, meaning the higher the price, the more people want it. The waiting list: 6 months to 3 years. And while Rolex watches are high quality, many watch enthusiasts argue that you're paying far more for the name than the watch itself. But that's the magic of Rolex. It's not about telling time. It's about telling the world who you are. So, is a Rolex worth the price? Or is it just genius marketing? Let me know in the comments.